Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, after the session on coffee, it is now time for panel discussion on vision for South Indian tea exports. South Indian tea's presence in the domestic market being largely region-specific, market being finite, there is a need to export more volume of tea. This session will deliberate on the roadmap on how to strategize the vision for South Indian exports, and towards this, the requirement both at the front and at the back end of the value chain. I would like to specially welcome Mr. Saurav Pahari, Chairman and Deputy Chairman Tea Board, to the dais. I also welcome Mr. Ganesh Deivanayagam, Mr. Anshuman Kanoria, and Mr. Anish Bhansali, the panelists. May I invite Mr. C. Shreedharan to moderate this panel discussion.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have an interesting panel here, and looking forward to good participation from all of you. So the background, for this discussion today and this session, it's been in the making for a while. We at UPASI have been working on a roadmap for the South Indian tea industry. So as part of that exercise, we had, enlisted the support of Mr. Lakshmanan, who's been with us here earlier and who's had some experience working in Sri Lanka, Kenya also. So we did an extensive tasting session where we put out teas that are manufactured in all these various countries, and along with the prices they fetch. And when you look at our position in South India specifically, from having almost 50% of our teas exported, we have now dropped down to 35%. So being largely a kind of an export market, this drop has directly contributed to the current stagnation in prices. As a result, our share of Indian exports too, from over 50% has dropped to around 42% now. So it's a pleasure today for me to introduce our speakers today. I will start with Mr. Saurav Pahari, who will be speaking first. He's IAS Chairman and Deputy Chairman of Tea Board. He will be making the introductory remarks and setting the tone and contour for this panel discussion. Mr. Pahari is an IAS officer of 2008 batch in the West Bengal cadre. He has served as the Joint Secretary of Food Processing Industries and Horticulture and Joint Secretary of Planning Department in the Government of West Bengal. A hearty welcome to you, sir.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. After that extremely enthralling session on coffee, this almost sounds like a sideshow, and I am a coffee lover, so please don't lynch me, the tea people out there. Having said that, I must say that Senior Pereira and Mr. Bopanna have made some very relevant points, which are not only relevant to coffee, it's very relevant to tea as well. Building a brand, that is something I have only been in the job in tea for the last 6 months, but I believe that, brand recognition is something that will drive the trade, both in coffee and in tea. Until and unless we can make a name for ourselves, unless Indian teas can be recognized as Indian teas, we are not doing our job as an exporting country. And since South India, most of its production is export-oriented, I think this an introspection, which Mr. Shreedharan very correctly said, that there is need for an introspection why our share in the export trade is coming down. And until and unless we sort of make our product to be a sought-after product, that people would want that, yes, this is a Nilgiri tea that I want. Until that happens, I think we have a long way to go. And this is, the very encouraging bit is, I think we have understood the problem and we are coming to terms with it. So there is a crying need to project South Indian tea as a consistent and reliable supplier of teas in the export market, and to build the brand as something which is good, which can be marketed as a gold standard. So that is the journey I think that the South Indian tea industry needs to focus on. I am very happy to see the panelists here and my friend from Sri Lanka. We had a very enlightening chat the other evening, yesterday, and learned quite a bit, like how Sri Lanka had, monopolized the export market at a point of time. I think we can learn from each other. It need not be an exclusive zero-sum game. We can, I think, act together, and I am very looking forward to a very enlightening and discussion on this. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. So we will, our next speaker, he is Mr. Ganesh Deivanayagam. He's a third-generation entrepreneur and business professional. Mr. Ganesh holds an undergraduate degree from the University of Madras and an MBA from the University of Southern New Hampshire, USA, and is a fellow member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, UK. He held a senior management consulting position with Styria and IBM in the UK before he rejoined the Eswaran brothers, a family-run business, as vice chairman 10 years ago. His company, Eswaran Brothers, is the third largest manufacturers and marketeers of value-added tea and exports to over 55 countries, employing over 400 people. It is the first certified carbon-neutral tea company in the world. Mr. Ganesh also holds a chairmanship of Tea Exporters Association of Sri Lanka and the Plantation Human Development Trust. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Ganesh for making the effort to coming and joining us here today. We look forward to hearing from him.
Sorry. This is the one. Okay. Good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to customarily acknowledge the presence of the chairman, deputy chairman, two in one, then that is, right, of the India Tea Board. The eminent panel sitting here, the leaders of UPASI, members of UPASI, and everybody who's come here today to share some thoughts on how we can improve the plantations in India, in South India especially. I would like to especially thank Shreedharan for inviting me and organizing this session at a very apt time, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, after a sumptuous lunch. Usually this particular sessions are called the graveyard shift. And I used to wonder, I used to think that, it's very hard for a speaker to work in the graveyard to, make people keep attentive. But now I realize that it's called a graveyard shift because of the so many empty seats that are here. So you can imagine where those people have gone. So I would like to first, once again express my greetings from, especially from our Sri Lanka Tea Board Chairman, Mr. Niraj Dimel, the Planters Association, the Tea Exporters Association, the Brokers Association, the Colombo Tea Traders Association, all of whom I represent here today. So greetings to you all from Sri Lanka. I would very quickly, go through a very short introduction to this particular topic. Thereafter, of course, we will go into more interactive, I suppose, which will probably keep us awake better than what, of course, the coffee has more caffeine. So tea we will, try to do better. So when I looked at this slide that was put together, we have the two countries' flags. We have common colors, you know, the orange and the green. And green, of course, is also representative of tea, I would imagine. There are many commonalities between our countries. I'm sure you would have come across many, you know, the food or the terrain, especially, you know, people coming from Kerala would not miss Sri Lanka when you drive around the countryside, your country. The food, exactly the same. In fact, I was sharing with Mr. Pahari yesterday, the national anthem of Sri Lanka was actually inspired and written, inspired by the great Rabindranath Tagore himself, and it was written by one of his students. So the commonalities are many. So having established that, I thought there's one more commonality which is also quite interesting. What do I need to press here? The arrows? Okay. Oh, all right, sorry. Okay, so this, of course, is thought, we have the love for cricket binding both the countries. And I couldn't help but putting this picture up, thanks to our recent proud win by our youngsters. This is one of the very few things that Sri Lanka could be proud of these days, so I thought we just needed to start with that. When it comes to tea, the story is very different. As you would see, the headlines, especially in the recent past, it shows two important things. One, of course, Sri Lanka has been victim to some very bad political decision making, and we have lost production. And India is, of course, taking some of that. That is a key message to take from these headlines. The second key message to take is the excellent job that the tea trade and probably the tea board is doing in doing this offensive campaign against Sri Lanka to gain that market share. So well done, you guys. Jokes apart, it's in fact, you know, the fact remains that we have done poorly because of the, you know, mistakes made by our politicians, and admittedly so, and the people have reacted and made sure that the people who made mistakes are fired, which is a great thing, which has caused, which will cause about 15-20% shortfall in our production this year, and we are very happy that, you know, that gap is filled by none other than our big brother India. I mean, we would be absolutely, we are thrilled that it is happening that way, and the very fact that, you know, UPASI has invited me from Sri Lanka to share the Sri Lankan thoughts on the vision for South Indian tea exports just shows the amount of trust, friendship, the great relationship that both the countries enjoy. So I would just like to, you know, this is my dad. Some of you may have met him. He used to say something about business in general. Doing business is like going into the ocean with a bucket to get some water. You can never dry the ocean up with our, you know, there's enough water for everybody to go in and pick up. So whatever that may have happened in the past, there is still more to do. There is still hope. So let us just understand what Sri Lanka Ceylon tea has done. We must have done something right. That's why you invited us here. So let's just see what that's something that we have done right. And this slide will just very quickly show something that Sri Lanka has done right. You know, the blue bars represent the value of Indian tea exports in US dollar million, which has been hovering around, I think, between 600 to 700 million dollars. Sri Lankan tea exports has been hovering around 1.2 to 1.56 billion dollars. But if you look at the production figures which are represented in those two lines, we are about 250 to 300 million kilos of production, almost the same as exports. And India is also about 200 to 250 million kilos. So there is definitely something good happening in the Sri Lankan experience, which we can, feel proud about. At the same time, there's so much that we can do more, and so much we can do together more as well. So what has Ceylon tea done right? So the key things, of course, largest producer of orthodox black tea, hold about 40% of the orthodox tea market. The biggest one, like I said, is that we are the largest value-added tea exporter in the world, with over 50% exported in shelf-ready packing. Also, we are the second largest tea export revenue earner, next to only China. And we fetch the highest auction average in the world. We are second largest export revenue earner compared to Kenya, which exports almost double our quantity. Of course, they do right now only CTC, but they're working very, very hard, my dear friends, to come into the orthodox market as well. So this is basically the summary of the takeaways that I gleaned from talking to the tea board chairman, the planters, when I was invited to come and share my thoughts here. So I will go one by one, then we'll come back to the summary. The commitment to quality is a very vague thing. Oh, we are all committed to quality. Quality is a great thing. But what in Sri Lanka we have seen, I mean, not to the happiness as an exporter as me, the Sri Lanka tea board is very, very stringent in the quality of teas that go out of Sri Lanka, including a very stringent control over imports of teas. We can't import any orthodox teas into Sri Lanka, zero. We cannot, unless it's a specialty tea that's very recognized. There's stringent inspections by the tea board, tea inspectors across on a regular basis, including they've closed and sealed factories which have done bad practices in the near past. There's up to 60 instances in the last 5-6 years. Factories have been suspended from production because of bad practices. So that is not just commitment to quality, but taking action on quality. Then government and trade are very passionate. I think in Lakshman's presentation to the UPASI also, he had brought this out. The trade as well as the government is very passionate about tea. I mean, we cannot but be passionate, right? We have only shipped, our total exports of the country is only, what, $12 billion, and this is about 10% of that. We better be passionate about it. And in India, of course, it's a very small in the basket of exports. But that passion, which is also the trade, the private sector, the brokers, everybody takes a keen interest in making sure that people are always conscious and people are brought to books when there is a problem. The second one to take away is the investment in the country branding. There was some talk about in the coffee, as well as Darjeeling has a regional branding. But Ceylon tea as a country brand has been going around for a while. I mean, we do have our problems. The moment government or the tea board gets involved in doing branding and things like that, the red tape is difficult for fast implementation. Yet we've come a long way. We've done a lot. There's a lot of investment that continues to happen. And there's also the GI registration of the 7 climatic regions of Sri Lanka for tea, the Nuwara, the Uva, the Dimbullas, and so on. And we pay for a fund. A promotional fund is created with the tea board. But this is no idea for Mr. Pahari to start a tea fund. Do not tax the tea exports. Sorry, because I will. No, right. So no, it is a bad idea, really. All I'm saying is the private sector has come together, bringing a fund. How the fund was spent is another story, which I can share with you later, right? So that is definitely a fund that is coming handy right now to even import fertilizer. We continue to do a lot of advertising online as well as in other forms. Brand promotion is continuously done. The third one is all about value addition. So these are some of the main brands the country would be proud of. There's continuous investment support for packaging machinery, because the right packaging machinery is what can really value add. So we even now we get interest subsidy from, of course, the promotional fund, which we have paid for, right? But still, it makes a big difference in making people to go ahead and make such big investments in packaging equipment. Also, we have a 50-50 brand investment scheme that the tea board runs. The fourth one is hand picking of teas. Again, something I may not, I mean, we as producers may not always want to see that hand picking this is a mass market product. We cannot be looking at costs in this fashion. But Sri Lanka happens to be still picking 90% of our leaves by hand. And the highlighting of some of the seasonal variations and the climatic conditions. So uva, for example, when the season is on, and it has a very special characteristic that gets developed in the uva seasonal teas, which has got that slight peppery, minty kind of a flavor. Japan buys it paying top dollars. So that sort of highlighting, so they talk about uva, even Sri Lankans may not know some of the characteristics. Japanese have come across this, and now they have come to appreciate it. And similarly, Nilgiris has that recognition. I mean, you go to any top tea shop in London or anywhere in the world, in Paris, there is always a few Nilgiris tins that are on the shelf. And the tea connoisseurs still do come for Nilgiris. So we do have that opportunity to push Nilgiris further up in the mind frame of the young consumers. And I was impressed when I came for the tea convention not too long ago, and you were giving awards for some specialty Nilgiri teas. In fact, I had contacted UPASI to do the same thing in Sri Lanka. We've started in a very small way to award the good teas of Sri Lanka purely by way of taste, because there are several awards that are given for auction prizes and quantity and so on. But for tea, it's ultimately what comes in the cup and touches the lip, right? So that I thought was something great that you guys were doing. The fifth one, again, a controversial thing, but this is another point that was brought about by the trade, that we have a large number of tea grades. So 14 plus orthodox leaf grades, 7 off grades. I'm talking about all orthodox. We do have 5 CTC grades. So this many number of grades also means that you're creating certain niche markets and niche products. Some people want that. And of course, the problem is, which I hear from some of the brokers and exporter friends here, that there isn't enough tea available of a particular quality throughout the year. So it's a chicken and egg situation, right? You will say there is no demand to export on a regular basis that particular grade, but then the exporter will say, we don't have it regularly. So all of this, I think, will be solved with this last takeaway, which is number 6. I had a little bit of second thoughts on talking about this. I said specialization and value add of tea exporters as a group. To come and talk about tea exporters in front of the producers. Thankfully, I saw the 2 gentlemen who came late on flight. They finally arrived, so I have support from 2 other exporters. But tea being such a complex commodity, in terms of producing, it's such a science, art, so much hard work the plantation community does. Whatever you all are doing is fantastic. At the same time, I really don't know if you will have time to market this complex product across the world with all these nuances, all these variations, and the variety that is being thrown around the world. The new youth wants tea with this and that and flavors, and now herbals are going as part of tea. With all this, will you be able to, as people who are going to focus on planting, also be able to do justice for exports? So in Sri Lanka is all I can talk about. In Sri Lanka, the tea export community has kind of been developed as someone who is respected and adding a key part of the value chain. Now somebody comes to me, I hope I have time, I don't want to shoot the time. Mr. Shreedharan reminded me of an anecdote. My dad apparently had spoken quite a few years ago, he's no more, at one of the conventions, and he reminded of a particular story, which I should probably just pepper it in here. A speaker who was talking for quite a long time, much longer than the speakers we've had today, and finally everybody is left, and one man was sitting, and he got up. Must be a planter. He had a gun at in his car. He picked that up and he started walking towards the speaker. The speaker said, "Oh, please don't shoot me. I was only doing my job." He said, "No, I'm not coming looking for you. I'm coming to look for the person who asked you to come and speak here." So, Shreedharan, I won't put you in trouble. Don't worry. So, the exporters are a key part of this whole thing, of all what we have spoken about value addition, about brand promotion. We have to keep our eyes and ears on the ground, just as you have to keep your eyes and ears on the ground for pests, for climate, for worker issues, whatever you are doing. Similarly, we have to keep our eyes and ears on the ground for market changes, prices. Some of the things that we do in Sri Lanka, quite a bit of our exports are sold on credit, and the exporters fund that credit. They take the entire risk around that. That actually, how much credit can make a difference for a trade, I don't need to, explain to you, great business people. Market expertise, innovation, I'll show you a couple of things that we have done in innovation. The transparency of the auction system, once again, a robust auction system is proven time and time again for a complex commodity like tea. And if you're going to bring, in Sri Lanka, 95+% of tea is sold only through the auction system, which has now recently been made electronically done. At the same time, it's absolutely transparent. Anything that goes wrong, we will be able to know. So all these, somebody comes and asks me, "Hey, what do you do?" I'm in tea. "Oh, where is your garden?" I said, "Sorry, I don't actually grow tea. I export tea." So I know the mind voice in that guy is saying, "Oh, you are another middleman, right?" But when I take somebody to our tea room, at any given time we will have maybe 3,000 lots open where people have to look at each and every lot of tea and taste and make sure that it goes into the right blend. With so much variations in especially the Ceylon tea, we are expected to give the same cup of tea every day in the morning, throughout the year, irrespective of whatever the producing gentlemen make in their factories. Whatever the rain gods are doing, we are expected to give the same cup of tea, also in many cases at the same price. So that is a key part of the value addition I think the exporters are bringing. And recognizing that, I think, and creating that, not just calling them merchant exporters, but having them as a key part of your value chain, I think is quite important. So these are the kind of 6 takeaways. I also would like to just give a couple of insights. One, of course, is RTD, just because in the recent meeting with the tea board we had with all the RTD, meaning the tea extract manufacturers in Sri Lanka, it is expected to grow leaps and bounds. There's already a 2 times growth expected by 2030. East Asia is consuming RTDs like crazy. So the South Indian teas definitely will have a great use because you have that capability to produce a standard. It doesn't have to be always, because the exquisite and excellent also has a small market. So something like RTD will have a big market share, even though only a few percentage goes in as an ingredient, the tea, it still will be a sizable market in the years to come. So that is one insight to share. The second one, of course, is about sustainability. I see a lot of hashtag sustainability around here. Sustainability is not just about green, as you all will know. Sustainability is more about being able to have the industry continuing, which means looking after the people who are part of the industry. This is something that's really coming up big. I see the organization called Business and Human Rights Resource Center. They have picked up tea in the last year or so. They used to be very big on garments. Now they have picked up tea, and news items are being peppered around. Just one news article is enough to put us down. So here is an area where we need to come together and do the right thing. I mean, I can only ask and answer questions about what's happening in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, if we ask the question, is a lot of things being done, as things have improved from the past? I'm talking about living conditions in the plantation sector of the people. Yes, definitely. A lot of things have been done. Is it being communicated well? No, definitely not. But the more important question, is there more room to do? Of course, yes. There's always more that we can do to the people on the ground, because again, this morning, plantation, the word, the connotation is still with modern day slavery, and a lot of people are talking about it. We all have to make a big effort to change this because the consumer wants it. The consumer is king because they are looking, they are not, paying their money. But I know of a friend who used to, when I was working in the UK, who would go to a coffee shop called Cafe Nero and ask for fair trade coffee. He will go every day, stop by and ask for fair trade coffee. And they will say, no, we don't have fair trade coffee. Every day he will still go and ask. He was making a statement that he wants to show that this is a company which is not doing fair trade. I want them to recognize this fact so that somebody at the management will think about and introduce fair trade coffee there. So this is what consumers are thinking, who we want to sell our product to. So this is the second takeaway. I would like to just finish with a couple of videos. One, which is a product that our company has patented and developed. It's a new type of tea bag. The second one is talking about the sustainability of one of another brand. These are just very small examples of many things that many Sri Lankan companies are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Ganesh, for sharing the Sri Lankan experience. It's been a thought-provoking presentation. We deliberated, quite a bit on inviting, the speaker from Sri Lanka. It was for the exact reasons that, what the statistics he has shown in his presentation. Definitely it's a big success story. We have similar terrain, we are very close to them geographically, but the value addition that they have done and the ecosystem that they have created, has resulted in over $1.2 billion of exports coming in at a similar volume as us. So I think there's a lot of points, and looking forward to having further discussions with him and questions from all of you as we progress. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Mr. Anshuman Kanoria. He is currently the chairman of the Indian Tea Exporters Association. He heads the Balaji Agro International and Kanoria International, which owns Tendaria and Gumti tea estates in Darjeeling. For the last 3.5 decades, Mr. Kanoria has been engaging in the world of international tea, covering various aspects including production, procurement, marketing, and development. He has served as the chairman of Indian Merchant Tea Exporters Forum, chairman of Calcutta Tea Traders Association, and the board member of Tea Board of India. So I'd like to invite him to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman T-Board, Mr. Saurav Pahari, Mr. Shreedharan, eminent panelists, and fellow stakeholders from this glorious world of Indian tea. It gives me great pleasure today to be before you. I personally am more involved in producing Darjeeling teas and exporting Darjeeling and Assam teas, although we do some South Indian teas. So perhaps my views are more neutral in nature because I don't have so far that much of a vested interest in the export of South Indian teas, though I would like that to grow. And I think there are great opportunities for it. The topic before us today is to identify and draw a vision for South Indian tea exports. I think before we start talking about a vision for exports, we must have a vision for the tea industry. If we look at the state of the Indian tea industry today, I am sorry to say that it is a fully fragmented industry with different stakeholders pulling in different directions. There is a serious lack of trust between buyers, exporters, producers, North India, South India, and so long as we stay in this environment with each stakeholder trying to pull the other down, talking about a vision for the industry and increasing exports is futile. So if we want to make a vision for increasing exports from India, the first commitment we have to make is to work together as an industry. One Indian tea industry, one stakeholder, moving in the same direction for mutual benefit and the growth and prestige of the Indian tea industry. And that to me is the starting point. We are having this conversation today about the vision for Indian tea because the pandemic has given a lease of life to various segments of the Indian tea industry. The unfortunate situation in Sri Lanka has further given us opportunities that we didn't think existed. We have seen this translate into the huge jump, particularly in orthodox prices. Clearly, some of the demand that has been lost by Sri Lanka has come our way. But when drawing out a vision, let us be clear, what is it that we want to do? Because Sri Lanka will be back. If not today, then tomorrow or day after tomorrow. If Sri Lanka loses 60 million kilos of crop this year, that does not mean that Sri Lanka minus 60 million is equal to India plus 60 million or 50 million or 40 million or anything. Sri Lanka has a certain type of tea. They have a certain type of goodwill. They have a certain type of marketing that has earned it the goodwill and trust of buyers overseas. And I was following the presentation of Mr. Ganesh with great interest because he gave us 6 takeaways about the success behind Sri Lanka. And if I look at the short points I had made to talk about our vision statement, it actually corresponds with all the 6 takeaways that he has given. He started with quality, and that is where I start. We as an industry, and I do speak very generally because there are some fantastic tea estates, fantastic exporters in South India who have done a great job in manufacturing top quality, creating fabulous markets and brand names for their estates. So I tip my hat to them. But today we are speaking more generally for the industry at large. When I see North India, when I see South India, the problems, the main issues are common. It really is the same issues we are grappling with. We as producers get too obsessed by what we are making. And we think this is what is right, and why is the market not buying this? I think we need to be listening much, much more to our buyers. The buyer is the king, he is always right. And if we want to expand the market, we have to bring out the teas that they want. Mr. Ganesh mentioned commitment to quality. So what is quality? Quality is a moving animal. To each person, it's a different perception. Quality is not just the cup that we drink. Quality nowadays is the story behind the tea. When somebody drinks a cup of tea, you, with your story of your estate, have to be able to transport the consumer of that tea in his mind to your tea estate, so he can visualize the story behind the cup. When I was much younger and coming into the world of tea, the business used to be done by taking a sample to a buyer. We would discuss the quality, we would discuss the price, and deal. The world has changed. Today, the first question that is asked is, what is your certification? Only fair trade, only organic, not enough. We really are at the mercy of certification bodies. And I think when we talk about our vision, India has the Great Plantation Labor Act. We need to spread our story much more widely so that the pluses of our industry, the care that we in our own way are putting into an ethical, forward-looking industry is understood and spread around the world. Moving on the subject of quality, today quality means certification. It means, first of all, MRL compliance. When we look at Sri Lanka, more and most buyers will tell you that they trust compliance with Sri Lankan tea. With India, there are many companies who now are making compliant teas. All teas are not going to be exported by a producer. And I say this as a producer who is an aggressive exporter. I can't export all my teas, and I don't make much. So cooperating with the larger community to make sure that you have as many buyers for your product is essential. You know, without competition for your tea, you are not going to get your unit price. And when we talk about vision and export, it is not always only about quantity. You must get a meaningful price for the product, otherwise what good is export? So quality is perception, it is the story behind your tea, it is the quality in the cup, it is compliance, all the factors. I think Sri Lanka, with its lion logo, has spread its message far and wide. India has developed multiple logos as well. The Darjeeling logo is kind of understood and recognized by some buyers in the world, though I personally would say there is not that much value that people associate with it. And we ourselves are to blame, because in Darjeeling we have allowed a large percentage of our production to become extremely ordinary. So I was sitting in Germany a month ago and chatting with a really large buyer who buys teas from all over the world. And I was making a plug for South Indian teas and asking him, why can't we give you more South Indian teas? And look here, I mean, I have various grades of good quality which I had bought before the market went up. Why can't you substitute some of your Sri Lankan requirements where you are short with this? And he said, yeah, sure. As of today, maybe to fill in the gap, I will take a little bit of these teas and blend it with some South Indian, Sri Lankan teas for my multi-origin packets. But I have a lot of packets where Sri Lanka is written on it. I'm not going to put this. And I'm not changing my packet right now. So I said, where is your problem? I mean, where do you see us lacking? And he would tell me that where is the body, where is the depth, where is the color, strength, and the complexity of flavors that I find in Sri Lankan tea. And he told me an interesting thing, that he started out in the tea industry in the 1970s. And he said that when I would walk into my tasting room, the aroma of South Indian teas being liquored there would overpower the whole room. And he was fascinated with South Indian teas. And he puts the blame for the market share going down squarely on the Russian buying of the 80s, where he says that you all just got a very easy source and you were very happy to keep making whatever and getting a certain price which worked for you, and you have never recovered from that. So I thought that the problem that he highlighted made a lot of sense. And all this has to do with the quality parameter. Which brings me to the next point, which is, where do we want to position ourselves? Mr. Ganesh in his presentation showed us 7 growing areas of Sri Lanka. And for each growing area, he had a quality description with which they market their teas and by which their teas are recognized. When an importer is buying a low-grown China, he says, okay, I'm getting a flat, sweet kind of tea, this is what I need. When he's buying an Assam, he is looking for a gutty kind of malty sometimes tea. When he is looking for a Darjeeling, he is looking for a flavor profile. This is another thing which an importer told me. He said, what is your messaging with South India? Where have you positioned your tea? Are you going to come and tell me, well, this is a neutral tea, you can use it just for anything? That is not it. We need to give it a branding. We need to associate a message with South Indian tea and or Nilgiri tea, that this is what we are, and this is the benefit you derive when you buy a Nilgiri or a South Indian. So we have already seen this even in this presentation from Sri Lanka, and this is something we have to work on. We must have a clear communication. We must ask ourselves, what are we trying to do? Are we having this discussion because Sri Lanka is behind and we can be fillers of the shortage and quantity and survive for a couple of years because Sri Lanka is short? Or do we want to use this opportunity to reinvent ourselves, to rebrand ourselves, to take the hard decisions on quality, how we maintain our plucking grounds, what we do in our factory, how we upgrade our factories, and do we really say, okay, we have a new reinvented version of South Indian tea in terms of quality and in terms of our positioning? If we do that, then we are there for the long run. Because just being in there for 1 year, 2 years, not going to solve our problem. We are talking here about vision. We have talked about Indian government wanting us to be 300 million kilo net exporter. We have talked about South India wanting to have 50% of the share like they had in the past. We have to ask ourselves, is that achievable? From 42 million kilos of orthodox, can you go to 120 million kilos? Probably not. So the point is, we need to set our targets more realistically, because the point is not to make more orthodox. The point is to make the orthodox that the market needs, both in terms of quality and in terms of compliance. We sit in many meetings in Kolkata where a section of producers are asked, so to increase exports, what do you need? And the number one answer I have always heard, and sometimes the only answer, give us orthodox subsidy. I mean, it is time we get serious, because it's your choice. What do you want? A quick free lunch or an obsession with a low-hanging fruit? Or do you want scarce money available with government to really prop yourself up for the long term? The government doesn't want to give you subsidy anyway. They hate that word. And every time we say, you give us orthodox subsidy, despite the booming prices, the good demand, we are actually doing ourselves a disservice. Today, when we look at the Sri Lankan slide, what do we lack? We lack, most of us lack. Most of us do not have the kind of factories that Sri Lanka has, the kind of blending and packaging units that Sri Lanka has. So what do we need? What is the government happy to give us? Quality upgradation schemes, infrastructure improvement schemes. Even in the past, the government has given 40% subsidies for orthodox manufacturing machinery. And a lot of people have taken advantage to spruce that up. So let us get machinery for color sorters, for blending machines, for packing machines, so that we can improve the branding of our product, the cleanliness of our product, and the consistency of our product. Let us ask, the other thing. What markets are we dependent on? When we look at the Sri Lankan story, they have a diversified buyer base around the world, pretty much around the world. India got into trouble because of our dependence in the 80s on Russia. Today we are heading into the same trouble because of our dependence on Iran. Our two prime markets are basically Iran and Russia. And we are going to be in the same kind of a lacuna if we carry on depending on 1 or 2 markets. We all know that a lot of our teas have MRL issues. Iran and Russia are pretty silent right now because of their own political situation. But awareness of pesticide is growing in both these countries. There are a lot of markets we are not being able to tap, be it a South Korea, be it a Taiwan, be it other markets that can take South Indian tea, because there is no transparency or guarantee of MRL compliance. Not only must teas be compliant, but they must be transparently compliant, so that a multitude of exporters are willing to push the product with lower risk than to be landed on the product or have rejections. So MRL compliance is another thing which is extremely important. Mr. Ganesh talked about value addition. He talked about investment in country branding. He talked about improving plucking standards. These are all what we have also covered in what we were saying. The Indian system also needs reform in the way teas are sourced. When we have meetings of the exporters, there is a lot of concern that we have demand for a certain quality profile, but there is no guarantee that that quality profile will be available to us, at least in the auctions. So there are a lot of orders which we are having to refuse because we don't know if that quality is available. So we are talking about Sri Lanka replacing some of the Sri Lankan quantity in export markets. And Mr. Ganesh talked about his slide number 6, which was to do with the auction system and how 95% of all teas are sold in the auctions in Sri Lanka. In India, we have so many debates about the merits and demerits of the auction system and how it should be run. A lot of conventional wisdom here is the buyer has the money, but he is not paying us. So let us tinker with the system to somehow try and extract that money that he is hiding. That is not your solution. There will be another segment that will say, we make the tea, we are not doing that well, that exporter is making money. Basically, I have had people come to Tea Board and say, I went to New York, this is my tea, I sold it for $1, that guy is selling it for $100, he is cheating us. You open your shop right next to his shop in New York, nobody stopped you. We need to respect every segment of the value chain. Every segment of the value chain is adding value to the product and incurring his own cost. So he is deserving of a margin, just as the producer is deserving of a value at which he can recover his costs and more. That is the mutual respect that we need. The auctions are an extremely important tool, in my opinion, but the Sri Lanka model has served them very well. In India, we have some people putting it in the auction. In many teas, it is the dumping ground of the tea, and yet the forum which does your price discovery. If you use it as a dumping ground, your price discovery is at the lowest end, and it's not a correct reflection of what is the price of that segment's tea. So we need to reevaluate that having multiple channels, is it beneficial to us? Some of you might say, scrap the auctions. Okay, scrap it. Let's do it for 2 months. Let's see what happens. Some will say, why 100% auction? What happens? Someone who is selling it privately, he has a financial problem, he is underselling his tea, taking a discount, driving down the market. So is this multiple sales good for the industry? And what should the auction be? Is this kind of auction that we have now the future? Should we not have something like an ex-estate auction, where there are clusters of warehouses made near the major sources? Let all teas move there. There are backward areas, low rent, low cost of storing. Let it be sampled from there. And let the auction then happen online and the teas move to wherever the buyer is. Will that not reduce sample quantity, lead time, and the auction cost? So of course, although I'm a supporter of auction, I believe reform is needed. Because without innovation and good change, the system will not be efficient. So we have talked about the subsidy, we've talked about the auction, the lion logo, and basically the messaging and the quality. So in conclusion, what is the message? And I would say that the vision for building a new market share must start with a positive change in mindset and must then travel on the cobblestone of cooperation, quality, compliance, upgradation of facilities, though hopefully with government support, promotion, and again, generic promotion using government funds, as well as diversifying markets. Above all, each one of us needs to play our role in committing ourselves to the quality that the market wants and to convincing ourselves that yes, exports is the long stay in revival of our industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anshuman Kanoria. I think being both a producer and an exporter, he has highlighted some very important areas. And definitely, one of the successes that we see in Sri Lanka is that the trade works together. So there's no doubt that there are a lot of benefits for everyone when you get everybody on the same side, be it the buyer, the exporter. I think we in South India would have to make an effort. And I think at UPASI, we should start taking those initiatives to start engaging more with the buying community and the exporting community. Quality, it's a very valid point that has been raised. So, it's something we should kind of introspect as producers. But having said that, I think we can have further discussion on that. Again, it's when producers have made quality, then we should get the price because it comes at a higher cost. So what is the long-term kind of benefits for that? And we should have a discussion on that and see how to take it forward. So I'll move on to our next speaker, Mr. Anish Sudhir Bhansali. He's currently the director of Bhansali and Company based in Kolkata. He has served as a managing partner to the company for over 36 years. Bhansali and Company doesn't need any introduction. They've probably bought all of our teas at some point or the other. They're one of the largest exporters from India. Mr. Anish Bhansali was a director with the Indian Tea Exporters Association and is currently the chairman of Kolkata Tea Traders Association. So I'd like to welcome you, please.
Good afternoon, friends and fellow members of the UPASI. It's indeed a great to share the dais with our very young and energetic chairman, T-Board, Shri Saurav Pahari ji, on this momentous occasion of the 129th Annual Conference of UPASI. Thank you, Mr. Shreedharan, for inviting me for this panel discussion. I distinctly remember 35 years back when I joined the tea industry as a young boy, still finishing my graduation in our family-owned business, Bhansali and Company. Many stalwarts of the industry indicated to me that merchant exports has no future. The reason, he said, that 10 years down the line, India would be a net importer of tea, keeping in mind the huge consumption and the increase of consumption of tea, which was happening rapidly. As we stand now, tea exports is a huge balancing factor for the industry, which ensures price stability and, of course, earn valuable foreign exchange. From a production of less than 700 million then to almost 1,300 million kilos today, the continuous increase almost every year continues. While the consumption keeps growing in India, there is a strong competition from other beverages. Keeping the above in mind, surely the industry cannot survive without exports. Tea exports can be broadly classified into two segments. One is the leafy tea segments, and the other is the tea bag type of teas. This can further be segregated as follows: the compliant teas and the conventional teas. When I say conventional teas, I mean teas which are not compliant. Due to the very tropical climate that we have in India, and due to which spraying of pesticides becomes a must, and also because of the very lenient domestic laws
on MRLs, most of the teas produced in India are non-compliant, especially CTCs, whereas competition from Africa is almost 90% compliant, hardly any local consumption, and very low cost of production. This makes us quite uncompetitive in the world market. Keeping the above in mind, our drive and push for exports should be focused on the leafy tea segment exports, mainly orthodox, as here we have a huge advantage over our competition in terms of know-how, and a lot of our teas are compliant. The countries where we should be focusing are as follows: Iran, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, China, Russia, CIS, Turkey, Albania, and Kosovo and Macedonia. We have a huge opportunity this year due to the crisis in Sri Lanka. Of course, we do wish that our neighbors can come out of the woods soon. This is where South India teas can make huge inroads into many of these markets. We need to make clean, well-rolled leaf with a dark, bakey character, which has been the mantra of Sri Lankan teas. One of the challenges of Indian teas has been the lack of keeping quality, which can also be addressed by making such teas. Few of the lacunas that I feel that the South Indian tea industry is facing is the availability of primary teas. There are instances which keep happening with us most of the time that the buyers are looking for much larger quantities, but we are not sure whether we can supply them, as we are not sure about the availability of the primary teas. The second most important thing is we talk about the South Indian sweet Nilgiri high-grown flavor. As our earlier speakers have said, that we have to move on. While I am a huge lover of the South Indian sweet character, we must understand that the world, although they do like the Nilgiri South Indian sweet flavor, at the same time, there is something else which they are looking for. They are looking for that very, very colory and colory teas, which is unfortunately missing in the South Indian teas. While the South Indian teas and the gardens, they can make these flavory teas during the peak season, but during the rush period, we can definitely try and make more colory teas. This would really help us in a big way. Secondly, what our other speakers have said, one very important thing, unfortunately, Indian tea industry, both North India and South India, have not grown out of the Russian days. It took almost 25 years for the North Indian tea industry to come out of it. Unfortunately, in South India, it is still a problem. We have still not understood that a buyer, when he's buying the tea from any origin, he is going to compare the prices all over the world before he actually makes a purchase. It's not going to be on the basis of a particular origin. So this point should be looked into definitely. While good field practices in the garden is a very important part for making good orthodox, I do believe that the battle is won or lost at the tea factory. Even though most of the Sri Lankan industry today is bought leaf, it's because of the state-of-the-art factory that they have been so successful in the orthodox manufacturing. With a very strong and robust government, bilateral agreements such as the rupee trade with countries like Russia, Iran, can definitely help us in a long way to increase our market share in these countries. I hope I have been able to drive a few valuable points for the vision ahead for the exports. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anish Bhansali, for your views. I think now I'd like to open it up for a discussion. So, most welcome to ask any of our speakers questions, and we can take this discussion forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all the panel speakers, for all the inputs that you have given us. It has given us an idea about what we should do. But when we look at the kind of costs that we incur compared to that of Sri Lanka or North India, our wages are more than double that of North India. And we are the only industry in this country which still has to pay for direct medical benefits. That's a huge cost, and we are actually trying to play a volume game, and that's where we are all going wrong. The inputs from all of you are really very apt and correct, but we are unable to do that because we are running after this volume game. Another factor that we realize is that 95% of the tea goes for auction in Sri Lanka, while only much less, maybe 40 or 50% goes for auction in India. And one reason is that the auction is neither the only way or the best way to sell tea, but apparently there's a huge flaw in this auction system. In fact, Professor Mahadevan of IIM Ahmedabad has clearly said that where there is no opportunity for a last bid, it is not an auction. And the time limit that you have in the North Indian auctions is certainly a big inhibitor of the tea getting its apt price. These are just two observations I would like to make, and I hope the tea board will take into consideration these matters. And one is introduce ESI into tea plantations. Secondly, very aptly said is the quality improvement that is required in our factories. Maybe the subsidies or support that we can get for tea production should be based on the process control equipment that the factories install, so that the parameters can be checked as needed, as and when required, in the time intervals required. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very perceptive comments there. I am aware that there are various schools of thought on the efficacy of the Bharat auction model that we are running at the moment. There are a few aspects on opinion which obviously, but I have to respect the position that I hold, and that is going by the system at the moment. But I am sure what you have said, there are lacunae in the present system. We are trying to iron them out when we sort of roll it into North India. I'm planning to be a very thorny process as well. But overall, I am of the opinion, and I'm told that Bharat auction system has operated quite well in South India. It's the overwhelming impression that I have got from interacting with most of the Mr. Shreedharan. You also I met Mr. Shreedharan 1 week after taking over, and he had given me a very thorough write-up on the good points of Bharat auction system and the revamps perhaps that need to be taken up to make it a more efficient system. I'm sure Anshuman is getting a bit fidgety over here.
So, on your first point, I can only sympathize with you, because as a Darjeeling producer, the current auction average is at 310 rupees with 58% sale, and that is exactly the average of Assam Orthodox teas with a 90% sale. Difference is cost of production in Assam is maybe 275 rupees, and Darjeeling is over 800 rupees. So this is the question we constantly ask ourselves, that there is no compensation for quality, and should one make volume. And in Darjeeling, the standard is organic, so how can you even make quantity? So I tell you this, look at any auction catalog. We blame the auction for faulty price discovery. In the most subdued of auctions, I have found some gardens who are consistently committed to the auction put in quality teas. And they have always fetched prices which are completely out of line with what the rest of the market has been. So in a 310 rupee average auction, there are teas which are getting more than 1,000 rupees. So I think quality finds its own level. And we have to really concentrate on what we produce rather than blame it on the system. And regarding the other point you made about Dr. Mahadevan, because I've spent a lot of time with him discussing as well, and my impression is that his first unofficial premise was that the model he has suggested works best if it is 100% auction. Okay, that is what he has suggested. And when we criticize what Dr. Mahadevan has said, we forget the basic premise, and we continue to do these multiple sales points which undermine our very effort, and then we blame the system. And if you want to talk about no time for a last bid, again I sympathize with you. And what sir won't like to hear from me is the only system in which that really worked, and which was perhaps the best for price discovery, and which is a favor to us as buyers that is not there, is the manual system. In a manual system, you had a room full of competitors who had the whole catalog marked. And I have sat in enough auctions for more than 30 years. And as much as it was your mission to buy tea cheap, it was your bigger mission to make sure your competitor didn't get tea cheap. So the moment you have gone away from manual auction, you have killed price discovery. That is my take. I might be wrong, people might disagree. Which one? Exactly. That's what I said. It always allowed for a last bid. I have no problem if it did. I mean, I have no problem if it did. And I'll only make one more point on the auctions. When we talk about price discovery, we talk about demand supply. But demand supply is not the only factor that discovers price. If there is only demand from one person, that's not going to get you a price. He'll get the tea at whatever he has bid. The overriding factor is competition. And in Sri Lanka, with 95% in the auction, you are unleashing all demand in a centralized marketplace, where even the producer, if he wants to buy his tea, is going into the auction and buying his own tea. It is only when you centralize all demand into a central marketplace that you have competition. And this is the point our inane and inner suspicion of the auction system has stopped us from going further with the auction system. We are losing on competition. We are losing on demand because a certain quality of tea is not there in the auction. And I agree with you. Even within the auction, reform is required. But in my opinion, to really get price discovery and to really get competition, you need auction. Let the producer make his tea the best he can. If he thinks his tea is selling cheap, operate in the auction, buy it. No problem. So that is my point.
First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Ganesh Eswaran for such a wonderful presentation and giving us the insight about the Sri Lankan markets and sharing his views so well. Even though at one point in time we were considering whether somebody from Sri Lanka would ever come because they are competitors for us. But we're so thankful for you to having shared your knowledge and insight on the tea industry from Sri Lanka. Just a couple of other points that very typically are a problem in South India is, first of all, Sri Lanka is only 300 million. We are 1,300 million in India, and out of which we drink about 1,100 million or maybe 1 billion kilos of tea. So we've got a huge, strong domestic demand. That's one big difference, and we are 5 times more producing than what you do. And the other thing is we've got certain surplus amount of tea, which we are trying to find into our export markets. And well, the other point which you mentioned was on quality. You did mention that all the tea in Sri Lanka, 95% is hand-picked. Even though we have such a large population of 1.3 billion people, we don't have workmen to work in our plantation here. In South India, we're struggling with workmen. And not alone hand plucking, we moved to shear plucking, and now we moved to mechanical harvesting. And a lot of gardens in South India are not doing hand plucking throughout the year. We only do mechanical or shear plucking. And we have no choice because of workers, and we have also, my good friend Mr. Johan Thomas just mentioned that the wage is so high. And if we are going to be sustainable as a plantation, we cannot do hand plucking anymore. Of course, we're trying to adapt with mechanical harvesting and quality. We're trying to see how we can match up to those qualities. But we've got a challenge there. And we're so short of workmen in South India that we have no other choice. We have no other choice. Just moving on to the next speaker, Mr. Anshuman Kanoria said that quality is the way forward. Yes, we all understand that, and here in South India also we are capable. And there are a lot of gardens we are making compliant teas. There are a lot of gardens which are exporting directly to the quality conscious markets of Europe, Japan. But the unfortunate thing is I've been in the industry for the last 40 years. And earlier the German buyers or the Japanese buyers would say whether the tea was good, they would cup it, they would liquor it. They never asked us the price. It was always quality conscious buying. But it's all moved to price conscious buying today. So first is the price. They want to know the price. And just for the audience, Mr. Ganesh just wanted to tell them that the prices are so strong in Sri Lanka that you're getting $6 and $7 per kilo of tea. We're not even getting $2 or $2.50 for that. So that's where our fate is. And whether I could put a question down to the floor today is it oversupply of this commodity? Is what the problem?
Thank you for those comments. I'll straight go into the question that you raised, whether it is oversupply. This is not one single commodity anymore. There are several stratifications within the market that we have. So there is definitely oversupply of some grades of certain quality, whereas there is definitely undersupply of particular qualities. That's why, like you said, Sri Lanka is not all Sri Lankan tea is of that quality. The $6 average is there, of course, but that's also because some of the teas that the Sri Lankan, especially the low-grown, well-made, leafy, tippy, that kind of teas are fetching, $9, $10, and they don't have enough. Whatever they produce, it's still not enough. So if the question is about oversupply, market forces will ultimately, balance things down. So if there is oversupply, prices will be so low. Ultimately, you will stop producing, or whoever is not able to accept those prices, it will have to adjust itself. So there is probably oversupply of certain grades of certain quality. You also mentioned about the 1 million plus market you have, almost as if it's a complaint. That is a blessing, just to have such a huge, vibrant. No, it is definitely a blessing. So that is also driving some of the other things that's actually happening. So for us, like I said, without exports, the industry is not there. Whereas here, this is almost like a cotton wool that absorbs the excess and squeezes out when the water is needed. Kind of you're able to cushion the industry's excesses and shortages. So it kind of serves a particular purpose here, the tea exports, so to speak. And that also comes into play when we're talking about, again, I have one comment about the online auction system. Sri Lankan online auction system is very different to what's happening in India. It is just an electronification of the open outcry model. The broker has to finally press the button to sell, which allows for the last bid to come in. So that's how we created the model, because that model was actually designed and created by the trade. There was no interference from anyone from the government. So that's how I think the industry needs to kind of pull it together. These are just my comments. I hope I answered some of your query.
On the subject of oversupply, I'll only say one thing. In the Indian tea industry as a whole, there is an oversupply of common tea. And that is why we see that the price of common tea is as low as it is. Whether it is some parts of the bottle leaf sector, whether it is some of the lower estates. The market does not have that kind of a requirement for lower teas. And that is what is pulling down the price. Even if you take the orthodox catalog in North India, there is a dual marketplace out there. For wherever the buyer is perceiving quality and compliance, in the same catalog, there is one kind of pricing, and for everything else, there is another kind of pricing. So, yes, there is an oversupply, but it is of common tea. And I absolutely get your point about lack of workers, absenteeism. But giving my own example, Darjeeling, practically every garden loses money. Okay? On top of it, in Darjeeling, organic is the standard. So more than 50% of Darjeeling is organic. At 50% absenteeism, we don't have workers to pluck. But the moment you're organic, you need to, per 100 hectares or 150 hectares, you need to dedicate almost 40 people every day just to cultivate and remove the weeds. But all of us have a focus that we have to make the best and we have to export. So I think there was a word I think you used inadvertently, that we have this much surplus to export. Our mind must shift from we have this much to export, from there to we will export this much. It is not the surplus that we need to dump in the export market. There is a certain quantity we must make of a certain quality, targeting the export market and a certain price. Sri Lanka has already demonstrated what pricing can be achieved. Look at North India Orthodox. The jump has been more than 50% in a year. There is no reason why Sri Lanka prices shouldn't go. If the quality comes up to a certain level where the buyers recognize it, if we put our story in place, how the buyers perceive us, what is our marketing mantra, there is no reason why, and to have export without an economical pricing that sustains the garden is meaningless. And every time I go abroad, buyers talk about sustainability, soil, workers, blah, blah, blah. And always our question should be, yes, we'll give you all that. Are you going to support the financial sustainability of our garden? Then let's talk. So I think it can be achieved, and export without financial sustainability is meaningless.
Prashant, I would just like to point out to you, when you talk about an average price of $6 and $7, that is something that you're seeing now, this year, because of the crisis that they had. That's point number one. And point number two, you must remember one thing. When you're saying that the average price is $2 or $2.50, please look into the fact, what is the percentage of primary teas that you have in the auctions, or what you're making in South India, and what is the percentage of primary teas that Sri Lanka is making, or for that matter even North India. The percentage of primary teas that we see In South India, it is really very, very low. So obviously, when the quantum of secondary teas is high, your averages are going to be pushed down. So the mantra here is that you have to make more primary teas. Simple. I mean, I know it's very easy to say, but that's the basic point that has to be looked into. I'm talking basically orthodox just now. Because if you see, the primary teas today in the auctions are fetching 300 plus. Whereas the secondary teas, what they were selling last year, they are more or less selling at the same levels. Why? It's because of the oversupply of the secondary teas basically. So until and unless you do not address to that, I know that there are a lot of problems that you face in trying to make the primary teas because you have to do shear plucking and you have to do harvesting by the machines where it's not so easy. But that is a thing, that's where we have to take hard decisions basically to try and make more primary teas, even if that is at the cost of losing crop. That's what I would like to say.
Even the secondary teas, the regularity of availability is a key point. Like, you know, Lakshmanan tries to buy secondary fannings for our tea bag blends, orthodox especially, because we look for only orthodox here. We will never be able to get the volumes that so there the demand and supply is the other way around. So it's consistency and quality in terms of the primary being offered on a regular basis for the exporters, which will make it make the difference.
Just one point here. We agree availability of over quality things. Maybe that's probably that is the problem.
Just an observation, not a question, to the panel. You are talking about auction system in tea. You are looking at tea crop as such. Now there are various crops being produced around the world. Auction system doesn't exist at all. And if you look at the price that the grower gets for that, many of the crops they get much more than what they get in tea. So we are looking at tea and saying this is the ideal system. But have you looked out and see whether this is the system? Because you are comparing today anybody can import anything from any part of the world. So aren't we getting into a system of over-regulation? Why should the government or a body control where the grower wants to sell? The basic question is what I'm trying to put it up to you.
I'll just make one quick observation on that. The auction system is there because a large enough section of producers want it and see merit in it. If the producer community thinks that they can do a better job of selling the tea without the auction system, there is nothing to stop them from discontinuing it from tomorrow.
I would like to make a different answer to that. So yesterday we were speaking to Mr. Gurmeet on the scientific and the chemical components of tea, and he cited a study where Yale University, I remember, he said tea is the most complex, chemically complex plant in the world, which also means that it's a commodity like no other. The reason is the climate variations make a huge difference. You're willing to pay just because it tastes slightly different this week than what it would be in 2 weeks' time. That complexity is not there in the rice or the dal or any other commodity. So for this sort of a complex commodity where the variations are so diverse, auction system is the best. That will give you the in terms of the price.
Let me tell you an anecdote. So in Calcutta, when two tea people meet, even in a party, which is a happening party, within 2 minutes the conversation turns to tea in some form. So there are enough other industrialist guys doing big businesses who will be in the room, who will ask, what is it with you tea guys? Why can two tea people not ever talk shop when they meet, even in a social gathering? And I always, so this one gentleman, he was in the business of steel, and I told him, listen, you get the same raw material into your factory every day. You put it in the furnace, you get the same finished product every day. You look at the price of that commodity on the LME and you just sell it. What is your contribution to the business? In tea, we have a different leaf every day. The manager has a handbook of excuses why that leaf got ruined and why it's not meeting the expectation of the head office. How you process it in the factory gives you a different tea. When it comes to the HO or to a broker, 10 people have different valuation and interpretation of the tea. So, as he correctly said, we are not a commodity. Okay, at the lower end, where there is an oversupply, we are a kind of commodity. But where you get pricing, where you talk about tea proudly, it is not a commodity. And if you want to do price discovery, you need a more open system to find out. I put my teas in the auction. Sometimes I'm telling the broker, start the tea at 500 rupees. And the tea sells at 1200 rupees. And I'm supposed to know my subject. And I'm supposed to know the export market. But tea surprises me every day.
Mention about tea, and as we all know, Unilever has exited from the hot beverage market after serving it for 140 years. They've sold all their brands, they've sold all their businesses and moved on. So they've obviously made their own reasons why they have moved on and not wanting to remain in the hot beverage tea business. It's a 140-year business and they moved on. No, in India, only in India and Indonesia they retained it. But globally they've moved out of tea. And very, very soon we probably will feel that even in India and Indonesia they'll exit, is what we feel. Thank you.
We had reached a situation where we were producing for the export. We were the largest consumer, we were the largest producer, we were also the largest exporter. And it was the government intervention to bring down the price of tea that completely, where the Sri Lankans came and took our market on a golden platter. Now we are asking them, what should we do to get back?
I agree with you, but right now telling the government, you ruined us, now bail us out, will not help us too much. So we basically have to find our way out of this mess ourselves.
No more questions. We'll close the session, but on my concluding remarks, I'd like to, Mr. Ganesh had made a statement that he was given the graveyard shift, The reason we put tea in the end was if it was coffee, all these people would have left, So you can imagine the reverse. So it's been a very interesting session. There's been a lot of participation. I just want to clarify a few things to our speakers. One is on the MRL levels. It's in fact, South India, we have a plus point. We still export 35% of our teas. The reason this 35% is going is MRLs are not an issue as much as it is elsewhere. Because we are on an extended round and almost 50% is from the smallholder. And due to the unviability of the current green leaf price, they undertake no spraying at all. So the odd issue that you face from there is your alkaloid issue from the weeds, etc. But that is being tackled. So I think that's a kind of a plus point which we should look at enhancing. This is what South Indian tea can do and probably develop some of our export markets. And one, when we keep talking about quality, I think Mr. Bopanna on the coffee side made an interesting statement that you can put lipstick on a pig, So I think we look forward to support from the tea board. We are, there is quality being made in pockets. Producers are working towards improving quality. So right now in South India, you have a broad spectrum. You have the best of orthodox teas being made. Even CTC teas, week on week, you have in auctions teas selling at 250 rupees, 2+ here. So, all types of teas are available here, but the bulk of the production is coming in because of the challenges we face with the almost double or 2.5 times the wage cost of anywhere else, large tea producing areas. So to keep our head above water, there are certain minimum productivity levels we're looking at. So what I think, we are very, fortunate today to have our chairman, Tea Board, and our executive director, Dr. Muthukumar here with us, and Mr. Soundarajan, director, Tea Development. So it's been a good contingent from Tea Board. So we look forward, in developing this vision, working closely with Tea Board, and generic promotion of tea, So I think the takeaway from how coffee was promoted by Colombia, and in Sri Lanka too, how they've been investing in promoting the Sri Lankan brand. So I think one is either to domestically also promote our tea and to go to specific export markets. The industry should work together, both producers and exporters, and see how, with the help of Tea Board, how probably some promotion and brand, awareness, so that, the Ministry of Commerce target of 300 million kgs also, we can work with them, and with some clear deliverables, with some investment from the board in promoting that. So we look forward to the board for that. Again, I'd like to thank our speakers, and Mr. Ganesh especially, who's come all the way from Sri Lanka and shared his thoughts. By calling him here, we're looking to collaborate with this. Sri Lanka has a beautiful ecosystem. It is not going to be possible to overnight create that in India. I think that will be reinventing the wheel. We need to work with the Sri Lankan value addition ecosystem there, and people who are willing to come and also look at our teas, and how we can move up the value chain. And Mr. Anshuman, thank you very much for coming here today and being with us and being candid with your views. We look forward to engaging with you in future and developing our vision statement. And similarly with Mr. Bhansali, thank you for your views and your suggestions taken forward. Thank you very much. Yeah.
It's an IoT, Internet of Yes. So if that is a 5-year project. So CDAC is working on it. They have a prototype. So this is something that I had already sent letters to Assam. There are departments who want to run the prototype. So if you guys are interested, I'll just send over the documents. That's actually it. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, if you could please be seated for 2 minutes, please. Dr. Jagdisha, Mr. Saurav Pahari, Mr. Marcelo Pereira Magnare, Mr. Bopanna, Mr. Ganesh Deivanayagam, Mr. Anshuman Kanoria, Mr. Anish Bhansali, distinguished guests, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to propose a vote of thanks as we conclude today's session, which started with a technical session on plantations in the forenoon, followed by value addition in coffee, the way forward, and a panel discussion on vision for South Indian tea exports this afternoon. We are thankful to Dr. Jagdisha, Secretary and CEO of Coffee Board, Mr. Saurav Pahari, Chairman and Deputy Chairman, Tea Board, Mr. Marcelo Pereira Magnare, Coffee Consultant from Chile, Mr. I.B. Bopanna, Chombuka Coffee Company, Kodagu, Mr. Ganesh Deivanayagam from Eswaran Brothers, Mr. Anshuman Kanoria from the Tea Exporters Association of Calcutta, Mr. Anish Bhansali from Bhansali and Bhansali Company, Kolkata,
for their efforts they have taken to come here and to address the delegates. We thank Dr. Jagdisha for agreeing to chair the session and conducting the proceedings on value addition in coffee, the way forward. We had an excellent presentation by Mr. Marcelo Pereira on coffee post-harvest practices and coffee fermentation techniques to enable estate branding. We are truly grateful to you for being with us and thank you for your interesting presentation. I thank IB Bopanna for his presentation on branding Indian coffee so as to empower Indian growers. We are extremely thankful to Mr. Saurav Pahari, IAS, for his thoughtful insights at this session on vision for South Indian tea exports. It is indeed heartening that he is visiting South India for the first time after taking charge as Deputy Chairman. We are grateful to all the panelists at the session on vision for South Indian tea exports, Mr. Ganesh, Mr. Anshuman Kanoria, Mr. Anish Bhansali, who made the discussions lively and relevant. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the speakers at the technical session on plantations held this morning. Dr. Rakesh Mohan Joshi, Dr. Gurmeet Singh, Mr. Marcelo Pereira, and Mrs. Shana Sheikh. I thank Dr. Joshi, Director IIPM, for your presentation on global dynamics, transforming Indian plantations, which has thrown up a lot of new ideas on how to strategize Indian plantations in the context of an open economy. My thanks to Dr. Gurmeet Singh, Professor and Head of TDU, for his excellent presentation on innovating tea. To Ms. Sanaz Sheikh, AI Gentrix International Private Limited, for their presentation on AI-based products for pest control in plantation crops. I thank the media, both print and visual, for covering this session and look forward to their continuing support for our future sessions as well as our future endeavors. I would like to thank Messrs. A.V. Thomas and Company Limited, Harrison Malayalam Limited, Kannan Devan Hill Plantation Company Private Limited, and Tata Coffee Limited for sponsoring the lunches for the 2 days, and Mrs. Kalachandra Coffee for sponsoring the refreshments. I also take this opportunity to thank the Tea Board and the Coffee Board for sponsoring and serving tea and coffee, and Mrs. Chennai Metex Lab Private Limited for sponsoring the folders. We are greatly indebted to all our planter members for making it convenient to attend this session. My special thanks to each one of you for your presence and wholehearted participation in making this event a success. Thank you all.